Hello, I've had a few people ask me this question, and in regard to Carl Zeiss and the Voigtlanders. The Voigtlanders have this same early versus later series of lenses. You can actually see the metering prong here. Some people call it the rabbit ears. This is a ZF lens. Carl Zeiss, this one's a 28mm of mine. This is the ZF2, excuse me, allergies here. The ZF2, it's a 85mm planar. Now let's talk about the differences, and you people have asked about this. By the way, the lens that I reviewed that I actually stated was the best lens that I own, flat out, balls out, bar none. That's the 35mm f2, by the way, not f1.4, f2. It's the Distagon 35mm f2. It's a ZF2 lens. It's available in ZF1, which has rabbit ears. Okay, same as this one, optically identical. You can obviously get it cheaper, so that's what we're going to be talking about. By the way, this is I posted up some test shots of this just to show you the difference as far as how absolutely insanely sharp this particular lens is. It's not sharp at all. It's intergalactically sharp. That's of course kind of obtuse saying, but it's in a way I could really emphasize it very well. Let's move these out of the way. I'll be reviewing these lenses in the next few days or whatnot. That's the 100mm macro planar Zeiss. It's $1,500 lens. Yesterday I reviewed the 85mm f1.4 Zeiss planar. This is, of course, I reviewed this today. I was telling you my #1 lens. Why I have two of these, I have no idea. I'm never going to wear one of these out in my life. Now let's talk about the differences. Point number one, we actually have a locking button here for locking in the aperture ring on the ZF2. This is current production. Now this is being replaced by the Milvus, but the Milvus, this one, by the way, is 9 elements and 7 groups. The replacement for it is also 9 elements, but some of you are confusing this f2 35mm with the f1.4, which is a lot more expensive. It's $1,500. But let's take a look back here. This is like a Nikkor transitional lens between the autofocus D series and the AI lenses. We have a CPU contacts right here. It feeds data to the camera for communication, which means that here's the difference between this one and this one, which is a ZF, and this is a ZF2. That I'm able to use this not only obviously so in manual mode and aperture priority, where I never have to touch anything here. I just lock the aperture, f22 or whatever the case may be on the lens, and I can use the lens in program mode, aperture priority, or shutter priority, or manual mode. And I'm always adjusting my aperture via my sub-command dial, or however you actually have your command dial set up. So I'm not sitting there constantly cranking on the aperture. I got CPU contacts here, feed data to the camera. Now you've seen various Carl Zeiss and Voigtlander lenses that are cheaper, same attributes like 35mm f whatever, and you wonder why it's cheaper. It's got rabbit ears on it. It's a non-CPU lens. You have to set non-CPU lens data in there. You notice there's no locking button on the aperture on this particular lens. All adjustments are done on the lens on this because there are no CPU contacts back here. You'll have to go into your camera under your settings menu and set what the focal length and the maximum aperture of this, and therefore the camera knows what's sitting on the front of it. But you cannot use this lens in program mode. You cannot use it in shutter priority. You can only use it in aperture priority and manual mode. And regardless of which of those two you use, you're constantly having to adjust the aperture manually like you do an old-time film camera. That isn't an issue for me, but sometimes it's a pain in the crotch, especially if you got your hands full. I mean, instead of me grabbing the camera in my particular favorite spot so they don't get any camera shake, I actually have to reposition my hand up here for actually changing the aperture, whether I'm in manual mode or in aperture priority. Because the camera is not going to adjust it even once you set the parameters for the lens. In this case, this is the 28mm f2 Distagon. Once I set that non-CPU lens the data setting, I still have to adjust my aperture manually on the lens itself. Whereas on the ZF2, not only do I never have to touch the aperture ring on the lens, I adjust the aperture via my sub-command dial on the camera. I also can shoot in program mode and shutter priority. So I can use program, shutter, aperture, and manual. Additionally, as is the case on a non-CPU lens like this, if you're spot metering, it doesn't matter. On this lens, I can actually change my spot to wherever I want it to spot meter. You know, I can move my rocker dial on the back of the camera or on my vertical grip to set my spot meter point, which I actually don't use, but a lot of people do that. On non-CPU lens data, it doesn't matter where you set your focus point. It's not going to spot meter. It's only going to spot meter right in the center. Okay, so those are the differences, and that's why this lens is cheaper. Not only is it older, and the same thing applies to the Voigtlander lenses. It's the exact same thing as applies to these Carl Zeiss lenses. So even though this lens is cheaper, you're going to constantly have to adjust the aperture manually on the lens. Over here, you're never going to have to adjust the lens at all. You lock into place at f/22 or whatever the case may be. Boom, let it go. You adjust your aperture via your sub-command dial, and I can also shoot in program, shutter, aperture priority, and manual mode. So that's the difference. I've been asked that question more than a few times recently, so I thought I would clarify that. And it was the ZF32. See, both of these are kind of identical when you set them side by side. Of course, this one's a little bit larger. You have any questions about this one, let me know. I heard a couple of you actually, when I said that this was the best lens that I got and it blows the piss out of everything else I got, a couple of people said ordered or snagged, and I thought that was really cute. And just remember, of course, I warned you, and it's not a downside, but it could be a downside for you. It's a manual focus lens. If you're not used to it, you know, you'd be like a fish out of water. And this lens isn't heavy. It is damn heavy. Okay, damn heavy. So if you're not used to manually focusing, I've told you some tips and tricks on how to manually focus very fast. You'll get used to it, just like someone learning how to swim for the first time. You know, oddly enough, my dad is like 60 years old, and he never learned how to swim. Yeah, blowing on the lens filter, which I'm never supposed to do. It's a really old, bad habit. I hardly ever do it. Yeah, my old dad never learned how to swim. So you'll be kind of like my dad. You'll be swimming in waters that you're unfamiliar with since you don't know how to swim. So make sure you know that before jumping into the expensive realm of snagging a Carl Zeiss lens, because these are all manual focus babies, and they ain't cheap, baby. They ain't cheap. However, this is the best value. You know, it blows the piss out of everything else Nikon's got. Certainly sharper than anything they got, and it's cheap. It's $600 cheaper than the Nikkor G f1.4 series. So in this case, this Carl Zeiss lens is incredibly underpriced, and of course the sharpness, color rendition, precision of manufacturing blows the piss out of everything Nikon's ever made. So thanks so much for watching. Catch you later. Bye.